Oh, you're right. Somebody turned that off. Would you like a microphone? Sure. Thank you. I didn't realize that this microphone had been turned off. Everything else was left on up here since Wednesday night. Computer, the projector, and so on, but somebody turned off the microphone. So that's not usually the case here. We are following the outline provided for us by Truth for Today. And they start out the lesson with this question: if you had one more lesson to teach, what would it be about? If you knew you had only one more opportunity to impact the lives of your friends, what would you say? And then it says, now think of Jesus. And there's a reason why these questions are being asked, because this is the last public discourse that Jesus gives that we're about to read. Now, he may have given other discourses, but none of the gospel accounts, no, not even the Gospel of John, records them for us. From here on, it's pretty much narrative, except when he's with his apostles. So we're looking at the last public discourse in his public ministry. And once again, we are on Tuesday of the crucifixion week. I told you we'd be on here with this at least 6 weeks on just one day. And there are so many things that are taking place on this day. But we're not sure, of course, that this was his last sermon. It's the last one that's recorded for us. But it's very possible that the text we're about to read in just a moment was Christ's final discourse with the people. And that last written discourse will end in verse 36 here in John chapter 20. And so from there on, Jesus will meet privately with his apostles. He'll be alone with them in chapters 13 through 16, followed by his intercessory prayer in John chapter 17, and then the rest of the book has to do with Jesus' passion and triumphal entry. This is the way that the other Gospels go. So once again, what we're reading here are things that are peculiar to John's Gospel. We're not going to find it in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It is John who gives more detail about the final intimate meetings with the apostles. The other three Gospels do not. And some believe that this text may have happened on Monday. But when you start looking at the evidence, it seems to be all on Tuesday. The only other thing that we're going to read in the other accounts will be basically the Last Supper, and they do record that for us. And so this is the only incident recorded by John between the triumphant entry on Sunday and the Last Supper on Friday. Our scene starts with a group of Greeks coming to Philip, asking to see Jesus. Let's look at John chapter 12, verses 20 through 22. Sister Jennifer, can you read that for us? John 12, verses 20 through 22.
Now there were certain Greeks among those who came up to worship at the feast. Then they came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida of Galilee, and asked him, saying, Sir, we wish to see Jesus. Philip came and told Andrew, and in turn, Andrew and Philip told Jesus.
Okay. The reading of this is sort of interesting. It's something you have to really reflect upon in the, at least I think so, in the order of events and the way that Jesus reacts. When you look at the original language here, the Greek word informs us that these were not Hellenistic Jews. That is, they were not Jews who spoke Greek, as you would have, say, in Acts chapter 6, with the Greek widows that were in need. But these were Greek people. They were Gentiles and not Jews. Furthermore, some suggest that these were Greek proselytes, Gentiles who are converted to Judaism, because they said, well, why? What other reason would they have been there for a Hebrew feast? You know. But I wonder if in Jerusalem itself you had Greeks, Romans and so on, who had been listening to Jesus. And they were very much interested in what he had to say. Now, they addressed Philip as Sir. And the word here is that of very deep respect. And it's interesting that they went to Philip, and Philip went to Andrew. What is the origin of the name Andrew? You have any idea, Brother Steve? Well, it's actually from the Greek word aner, or for man. Andrew is a Greek name, and it means manly. And furthermore, I don't think I have to tell you that Philip is a Greek name. I had to look that one up. You know, what does the name Philip mean? Have you ever come across that? Lover of horses. Lover of horses. Now, just think about that. We have Greeks coming to Jews wanting to see Jesus. But who do they go to? To men who have Greek names. Of course, they initially go to Philip, and then Philip goes to Andrew, which is rather interesting. I think it's very instructive to us, because people are attracted to people who speak their language. And so they could more easily identify, at least with men who had Greek names. Philip did not know what to do. Why wouldn't Philip know what to do? I said, why wouldn't he know?
He was not one of the apostles.
Pardon?
I said he wasn't one of the apostles.
Yes, he was one of the apostles. Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Andrew called Philip.
Uh-huh.
So Philip the Andrew is called Peter.
Okay. But why? Well, let's get back to my question here. Why do you think Philip would be confused as to what to do?
Could be where he was in terms of the apostles, not really having bad experience, and not feeling he's got the authority.
Now remember, these are Gentiles
Yeah.
coming to see Jesus. What had Jesus instructed his apostles?
He was sent to the Jews.
That's right. Only go to the Jews, not to the Gentiles. And so here, Gentiles are coming, and he doesn't even know whether to tell Jesus. He gets advice from Andrew. Okay? And a lot of this, I think, helps us to understand what Jesus says later in the near verses. So they were only to go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, Matthew chapter 10, verses 5 and 6. And so we do not know if Jesus ever met with these Greeks. The text doesn't indicate that he did. But it did trigger a sermon that could very well be his last ever preached discourse. And it took me a long time before I could draw any conclusion. I'm not saying the conclusion that I've drawn is necessarily right. But at first, when you read Jesus' response to this, you're saying, well, what in the world does that have to do with Greeks coming to see Jesus? Well, he began by saying the hour has come, verse 23. And now we have to ask the question, what hour is this? Now, we're going to go ahead this week and follow the lesson plan given to us. For it gives us 4 different hours, or maybe divisions of this hour that needs to be considered. First of all, we have the hour of the cross and commitment. That would be verses 23 through 26. And then there would be the hour of conflict and confirmation, verses 27 through 30. You don't have to write these down. We'll mention them again when we come to them. And then we have the hour of conquest and conversion, verses 31 through 33. And then we have the hour of confusion and challenge, verses 34 through 36 and verses 46 through 48. Only thing I can say about this outline is that a preacher had to write it, because all these words start with C. That's right. So let's look at the first of these, the hour of the cross and commitment. This would be verses 23 through 26. Sister Bergstrom, would you read that for us?
Sure. But Jesus answered them, saying, the hour is come that the Son of Man should be glorified. Most assuredly I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls on the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much grain. He who loves his life will lose it, and he who hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. If anyone serves me, let him follow me, and where I am, there my servant will be also. If anyone serves me, him my Father will honor.
Okay, thank you. Well, did Jesus ever see these people? They asked to see Jesus. Did they ever see him? John doesn't tell us. But I think, again, I'm looking at how John writes. I think if we read a little bit further, the answer is no. He did not see them. And the reason I say that is look at the end of this discourse, the last words of the final discourse of Jesus. Okay, verse 36. Would you read that for us, please?
While you have the light, believe in the light, that you may become sons of light. These things Jesus spoke and departed, and was hidden from them.
And was hidden from them. Does this happen anywhere else where Jesus would depart from people? And when did this happen, say in John's Gospel?
Oh, John's good. I was thinking that when they were on the road to Jerusalem, the disciples went ahead and he was behind the disciples. Seems to me that he was making the time for himself to be with the Father.
Okay. But this really seems to be that this was a retreat. I mean, he got away from everybody. Let's go back and look at John chapter 6 and verse 15. And you may say, I don't know if you're making any leeway with this, but you remember this is the great chapter of conflict in Jesus' public ministry. You have the feeding of the 5,000. You have him giving his discourse on the bread of life and so on. And of course, when he gets through telling them what they must do, eat of his body and drink of his blood, they walked away from him. A lot of them did. Most of them, nearly all of them did. But look at verse 15. Would you read that for us?
Therefore, when Jesus perceived that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he departed again to the mountain by himself alone.
Yeah. What is, as we're going to be reading here in John chapter 12, what do you think is going on in the minds of the apostles? Remember, the beginning of the week, 2 days before, on Sunday, we have the triumphal entry, don't we? And how are the people, those who are honoring Jesus and so on, what are they envisioning? A king that's going, an earthly king that's going to deliver them from Roman occupation, basically. They seem to share the same expectation that the Jews had, and in both situations, Jesus rejected it and literally walked away. He walked away from the Jews in John chapter 6, and he's walking away from the Gentiles here. Why? Because they had been thinking this whole time that Jesus had come to set up an earthly throne. They probably thought he was going to do it on Sunday evening during the triumphant entry into Jerusalem. But they were soon disappointed, weren't they? And so you have to ask yourself the question, why did they want to see Jesus?
To establish the kingdom.
Well, what I'm seeing with what Jesus has to say that follows, it completely takes the other side of the whole issue. Instead of Jesus saying, yes, I'm here to receive my throne, to receive my crown and take my place on the throne, he now gives a discourse on what?
Cross.
Yeah, on dying. You see, this is to counteract, is that a word? Counteract what the Jews had been thinking and now what the Gentiles had been thinking. And that's the only way I can make any sense of what John records for us that is in response to the request that these Greeks had to see Jesus. And in this discourse, he answers that question.
But,
Yes,
but I think he also needed the time to be alone to recheck what his father wanted him to do.
Well, he's going to have time for that later on.
Like right now, it's like,
Yeah.
I gotta be on myself to see what he really wants me to do.
Yeah, he's going to be doing that all during the week, even in the garden, But it's at this particular point that Jesus leaves them. And now he gives a very powerful illustration. A grain of wheat must die to bear fruit. The same had happened with Jesus. He had to die in order to bless others. And the only way that he could bring about new life was to give his life through his death. This is completely opposite of any entertainment in their minds of an earthly king. That's not what kings do. And so let's consider how this hour of commitment was going about. We must love our lives less than doing the Lord's will. And of course, we usually understand the word hate here is to be understood to love less in verse 25. And so the only way to live is to die. Those at that time died physically, but we also have to die spiritually. What did Paul say in Galatians 2 and verse 20? I have been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. So Jesus provides great motivation to serve and follow him. When he said, where I am, there my servant will be also. He's referring to heaven in verse 26. Imagine being honored by God himself. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him. So this has been an hour for cross and commitment, but it's also an hour of conflict and confirmation. Let's go on and read verses 27 through 30.
Now my soul is troubled. What shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this purpose I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice came from heaven saying, I have both glorified it and will glorify it again. Therefore the people who stood by and heard it said that it had thundered. Others said an angel had spoken to him. Jesus answered and said, this voice did not come because of me, but for your sake. Now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out. And I, if I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all peoples to myself. This he had said, signifying by what death he would die.
Okay. John did not record Jesus in Gethsemane, but he does give us a glimpse into Christ's heart. Jesus told us, or John told us, that Jesus is saying, my soul has become troubled. In other words, Jesus knew what was ahead for him. It's terrible things, weren't they? And Christ had a choice. And notice, even in the reading, Jesus verbalizes that choice. What shall I say? Or what should I pray? Should he ask or pray that the Father would save him or not? The answer was an emphatic no.
But I think that's the C, the conflict, right?
That is the conflict.
Internal conflict.
It is the conflict, that's right. For this purpose, I came to this hour. That's why we have the second division here in verse 27. It was the hour of confirmation. Notice Jesus' confirmation. He says, Father, glorify your name. Verse 28. And then see God's confirmation in the second part of that verse. What did we read?
A voice came from heaven.
Yes, saying, I have both glorified it, and I will glorify it again. There's your confirmation. During Jesus' ministry, how many times did God speak directly from heaven? Okay, I'd forgotten one of them. Go ahead, tell us what they are, Steve. Oh, were you going to say something?
No, I just clarifying with him that it was three.
3. Okay, go ahead, help us, Steve.
The first one is at his baptism.
At his baptism,
The second was at the Mount of Transfiguration.
the Mount of Transfiguration.
The third is right here.
The third one is right here. The confirmation from heaven. And we have it right here. Some understood the voice, and others did not. Boy, there's a lot to think about when you read, for instance, verse 29. Therefore, the people who stood by heard it, said that it had thundered. Others said an angel has spoken to him. What do you suppose? Some people would understand the message, and others would say, it's just thunder. What thoughts do you have, Brother Miller?
My thoughts are, depends upon the conditions.
Your heart condition, yeah.
Okay, now that if their heart is really,
Soft and
that's
receptive.
very cold and hard, they would say it's thunder. But if they are softer, they'll say it's the angel.
So if they're focused on Christ,
They really heard it.
they're going to understand. If they're focused on themselves,
It's thunder.
they're not going to understand. It's not going to mean anything to them. You know, God's word has that power. It really makes distinctions in the hearts of men. So if we don't want to listen to God's voice in nature and the Bible, we're not going to hear the confirmation. But if we want to hear God and we listen, we are going to hear that confirmation. And so it was the hour for the cross and commitment, for conflict and confirmation. And now in the third place, it's an hour for conquest and conversion. Okay, let's read a little bit further, Sister Burks, from verses 31 through 33.
Now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world will cast you out. And I, if I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all peoples to myself. This he said, signifying by what death he would die. The people answered him, We have heard from the law that the Christ remains forever. And how can you say the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is the Son of Man? Then Jesus said to them, A little while longer the light is with you. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness overtake you. He who walks in darkness does not know where he is going. While you have the light, believe in the light, that you may become sons of light. These things Jesus spoke and departed and was hidden from them.
You know, when you read that last verse once again that we read before, he doesn't stay around for any more discussion or for clarification, does he? He says it. It's almost as though take it or leave it.
Like mic drop.
Yeah,
Gone.
this is just the way it is. Yeah, you have no choice. See, up until this time, even especially back in chapter 6, and then when we got in chapter 7, you've got people trying to manipulate Jesus' ministry. Even his own physical brothers did the same thing. They're telling him what time to go down to the feast. He said, you need to go down now. Jesus says, no, I'm not going down. He goes down later. Because they are all acting out of their own personal expectations. And a lot of times when I read passages like this, not necessarily this one, but other passages, I reflect on why do we have so many different kinds of churches in the world today?
Whatever suits their needs.
Or their expectation. You know, I don't get very many visitors anymore. Not many people visit church buildings during the week anymore. I used to have a lot of visitors that come by and so on. And they would have a request. First of all, they would think that I'm the pastor, and I'm not the pastor. I am a pastor now, but I wasn't a pastor then. And they had an idea of what a pastor. This is what your job is. And there might be a whole list of job descriptions for the person who holds the position as what we call a minister today. But perhaps on the end of that list is presenting God's Word. Because, you know, we got some social concerns here. We got this problem and that we're looking for somebody that's going to help us with this, which is fine. I mean, we want to be helpful to people. But people come to their religion with special expectations. In fact, oftentimes that's exactly how they choose their religion. Or as we used to hear on the television, public announcement, go to the church of your choice. That's what we're seeing here. Before Jesus would be glorified, what would have to first happen? He would first have to be crucified. That's not my expectation of a Messiah or the King of Israel.
If you're looking for the physical kingdom, no. If you're looking for the spiritual kingdom that God is presenting to all the Jews, yes.
You know, in all fairness to the apostles, I think they were pretty spiritually minded. But they weren't getting this. Jesus tells them at least 3 times, I got to go up to Jerusalem to die. You know, it just doesn't register with them. Yes, Steve, and then we'll come over to Brother Suresh. Yes.
When you start to realize that even though those were not quote canon, they were pretty much accepted the general idea of what to expect. How many of us today find people who believe in a rapture before the second coming or a 1,000-year reign before the end of the world, etc., etc., etc.? None of which is found in Scripture, but it's found because people have allowed these people to tell them what to expect.
Okay. What we're seeing here is a decisive battle between good and evil. This is a spiritual battle. And it's going to be fought on the cross. Do you mind turning to Hebrews chapter 2, verses 14 and 15? It says pretty much the same thing we have here. Hebrews chapter 2, verses 14 and 15. It helps put a proper understanding of what's going on here.
Okay, Hebrews chapter 2, 14 and 15? Inasmuch then as the children have partaken the flesh and blood, he himself likewise shared in the same, that through death he might destroy him who had the power of death, that is, the devil, and release those who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. For indeed he does not give aid to angels, but he does give aid to the seed of Abraham.
Okay. And so the idea is you can't have a resurrection until you have a death. And so life comes from death. Boy, that's a completely different way of seeing the world, isn't it? How do we see death so often? As the end. But the Bible presents to us it's the beginning. It begins a new life. And so Jesus himself likewise also partook of the same, that through death he may render powerless him who had the power of death. Who's that? The devil. This is a spiritual battle going on here. And might free those who through fear of death were subject to slavery all their lives. We should, as children of God, we shouldn't be fearing death unless we're not prepared for death. That should give us tremendous comfort. And finally, it was also an hour of conversion. Notice the phrase, if I be lifted up. What does that mean? If he be lifted up. That's right. It's the manner in which he would die. And they put him up on the cross, John 12:33. And he says that he will draw all men to himself. So we understand that his death was not just for the Jews, but for everyone. Verse 33. Notice how Jesus would bring people to him by drawing, not by forcing or pushing. It's who Jesus is that draws people to him.
It's the same today.
Absolutely, it's the same today.
How many people are really being drawn to Jesus, more so with the times that's going on in the secular world.
So it was the hour for the cross and commitment, for conflict and confirmation and conquest and conversion. Now on Wednesday, we're going to be looking at the fourth of these, which is going to be the hour of confusion and challenge. And now take us through at least down to verse 48 of this chapter. What questions or comments do you have? It's really a challenging chapter trying to understand how the various verses fit together and why Jesus says what he says when there are Greeks or Gentiles who come requesting to see him. They're looking for a king too, aren't they? And Jesus, it appears to me that what Jesus is saying, and by his action, he's not going to have anything to do with those expectations. There, in John chapter 6, they were going to take him by force and make him king. And what's interesting is the reason why they wanted to do that. He had just fed the 5,000. Boy, that's your free meal for the rest of your life. But he came to address spiritual interests. not physical ones. Thank you very much, and we'll stop here and continue on a little bit later on.